She walks into your life like the answer to a prayer. She listens with eyes that seem to see through your soul, remembers the small details you thought no one noticed, and carries herself with a grace that makes everyone around her admire her. Friends congratulate you. Your parents approve. And for the first time in a long time, you feel you've found someone who truly understands you. But then, months later, you're sitting alone in your car, dreading the moment you have to walk through the door of your own home. Something inside you has shifted. You no longer recognize yourself. Your confidence is gone. Your memory feels unreliable. And the person who once felt like your safe place has become the very source of your unease. This is the paradox that destroys many men. Not falling for the wrong woman, but falling for the woman who seems right in every way. Because the most destructive patterns rarely announce themselves with warning signs. Instead, they hide behind warmth, empathy, and the illusion of connection. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Many of these women carry within them shadows they have never faced, unhealed wounds that need somewhere to land. If you are not careful, those wounds will land on you. This process begins quietly. At first, you feel like you are being trusted with her deepest fears and most painful memories. She opens up about her childhood, about betrayals, about the loneliness she has carried for years. It feels intimate. It feels sacred. But in reality, she is not sharing to build connection. She is unloading to find relief. Every confession lightens her load while it silently adds to yours. You begin carrying emotions you did not create, managing triggers you did not cause, and adapting to storms that are not yours to calm. Over time, you mistake this emotional burden for intimacy. You think, "She needs me. I'm the only one who can help her." But the truth is harsher. She has made you a container for her chaos. This is the first trap, what I call the wounded savior. She appears broken, fragile, in need of rescuing, and your masculine instinct to protect, to provide stability, responds to that call. You think that by healing her, you will build something unshakable together. But her survival depends on never truly healing. Every step you take to fix her becomes another thread in the net that holds you. Freud once described repetition compulsion, the drive to unconsciously repeat unresolved wounds. She is not seeking healing. She is seeking to relive the wound again and again, using you as the stage. I once knew a man who fell into this very trap. She told him on the first week about her trauma, about the betrayal of past partners, about the father who abandoned her. He swore he would be different, that he would protect her from ever feeling that pain again. Years later, he was exhausted, resentful, and broken, because no matter what he gave, she always found a new way to be hurt. And when he finally left, she told the world that he had failed her, continuing the cycle that began long before he entered her life. Closely tied to the wounded savior is another pattern, the emotional parasites. While the first binds you with sympathy, the second drains you through dependency. This woman does not want a partner. She wants a host. She positions herself as someone who could be incredible if only she healed, if only she achieved her goals, if only the world hadn't been so cruel. That if only it becomes your mission, you pour your energy into her potential, convinced that your love can unlock it. But her survival depends not on reaching her potential, but on keeping you trapped in the process of trying. The parasite never fills up, because what she feeds on is not solutions. It is the act of being saved. She thrives on your endless effort, your constant reassurance, your tireless attempts to fix problems that were never yours. The more you give, the less of yourself remains. You wake up one morning and realize you have become a shell, living not for your own growth, but to sustain hers. And even then, she will tell you it's not enough. There's a cruel irony here. Men in these relationships often believe they are becoming more loving, more patient, more compassionate. But in reality, they are becoming less themselves. Real love requires two people both carrying the weight of their own wounds, meeting in strength. What happens here is the opposite. You become weaker so she can feel stronger, smaller so she can feel larger. If you have ever felt constantly guilty in a relationship without knowing why, if you have ever felt like no matter how much you gave, it was never enough, you may have already touched this dynamic. And if you have, you know the toll it takes, not just on your energy, but on your very sense of identity. The hardest part is recognizing it while you're still inside it, because both the wounded savior and the emotional parasite disguise themselves as love. They do not come at you with hostility. They arrive with open arms. And by the time you realize those arms were holding on to you, not out of devotion, but out of survival, you are already entangled. What makes these traps especially dangerous is how invisible they are to the outside world. Your friends will see a woman who is sensitive, vulnerable, maybe even admirable for how much she has endured. They won't see the late-night arguments, the endless emotional caretaking, or the way you have slowly faded into the background of your own life. And because they can't see it, they can't warn you, you end up doubting your own perceptions, thinking the problem must be yours. This is only the beginning, because if the first traps disguise themselves under vulnerability and neediness, the next ones are even harder to detect. They hide not just in intimacy, but behind masks so convincing that the whole world cheers them on, while you alone bear the weight of their private reality. There is a particular kind of woman who fools not only you, but everyone around you. She is graceful in public, admired by your family, respected by your friends. People tell you constantly how lucky you are, how she seems like the perfect partner. But the version you see when the doors close is nothing like the one everyone else praises. She criticizes, manipulates, and controls in ways so subtle you start to question whether you're imagining it. This is what I call the masked controller. Her public image is her weapon. In psychology, there's a term called impression management. It's the ability to craft how others see you, often with great skill. The masked controller lives by this. She projects an aura of kindness, empathy, and maturity in public, but in private, she exerts control through criticism, withdrawal, and guilt. When you try to speak up about her behavior, no one believes you, after all. Everyone knows her as wonderful. This makes you doubt your own reality. You start wondering, am I the problem? That doubt is her strongest form of control. I once mentored a young man who lived through this exact nightmare. His partner was adored by his circle of friends, praised by his parents, and even admired by his co-workers. But at home, she controlled every aspect of his life. His time, his decisions, even who he spoke to. Whenever he tried to explain, people looked at him like he was crazy. She's so sweet. They'd say, you're lucky. That isolation is exactly what she wanted. By building a fortress of social proof, she made his suffering invisible. And then there is the chaos generator. She cannot function in peace. Stillness terrifies her, because when things are calm, she has to face herself. Instead, she manufactures crisis after crisis. A small misunderstanding becomes a week-long argument. A missed text becomes proof of betrayal. She thrives on intensity, mistaking constant drama for deep intimacy. The problem is, men often mistake it too. Many of us are conditioned to equate passion with turbulence. We think if a relationship is calm, it must be shallow. And if it's filled with arguments and reconciliations, it must mean the connection is powerful. But that's not passion, that's instability. Attachment theory explains why some people create this cycle. Their nervous systems are wired to crave intensity because it distracts from inner emptiness. With the chaos generator, you spend your days putting out fires you never started, too exhausted to notice the real problem. She creates the fire because she cannot live without it. A man once told me he thought he had finally found his soulmate because he had never felt so strongly about someone before. The relationship was a constant roller coaster, fights that shook him to his core, reconciliations that felt like heaven. He thought the depth of his feelings meant he had found true love. In truth, he was addicted to the cycle of chaos and relief, confusing intensity for intimacy. By the time he realized it, his health was suffering. His friendships had collapsed, and his career was slipping. Chaos doesn't just drain your energy. It colonizes your entire life. Then comes the boundary breaker. Unlike the chaos generator, she doesn't thrive on storms. She thrives on access. To her, love means ownership. Your time, your space, your privacy. None of it belongs to you anymore. She reframes boundaries as rejection, privacy as deception, and independence as betrayal. At first, it looks like devotion. She wants to be with you all the time, to know everything about you, to share every moment. It feels flattering, even intoxicating. But over time, it becomes suffocating. Boundaries are the foundation of respect. Without them, love turns into control. The boundary breaker slowly erodes yours, making you feel guilty for wanting time alone, or selfish for protecting your own needs. You stop seeing your friends. You abandon hobbies she doesn't like. You give up solitude just to keep her happy. Before long, your life becomes a reflection of her needs, not your own. Kierkegaard once said, "The most dangerous thing of all is to lose oneself." And yet it can happen so quietly. It is as if it were nothing at all. That is the slow death a boundary breaker brings. If you've noticed the pattern here, each archetype escalates not with visible violence, but with invisible theft. The theft of your energy, your peace, your very sense of self. First, they borrow your sympathy, then your stability, then your boundaries, until there is nothing left untouched. And what makes it so dangerous is how normal it looks from the outside. To the world, you are still in a happy relationship. To you, every day feels like survival. And here is where the trap becomes nearly inescapable. Because the next forms of manipulation do not just invade your boundaries or create chaos. They target something even more essential, your perception of reality itself. When the ground beneath your feet begins to shift, when you no longer trust your own memory, when your very sanity comes into question, you will understand why some of these women are not merely difficult, but truly destructive. There is no manipulation more devastating than when someone convinces you not to trust your own mind. This is the weapon of the gaslighter. With her, every memory becomes uncertain. Every conversation, a debate about what really happened. You recall her saying something cruel, but she insists it was never said. You point out a pattern of behavior, and she tells you you're imagining things. Slowly, the ground beneath you dissolves. The more you argue, the less you believe yourself. Gaslighting works because it doesn't strike all at once. It creeps in gradually. At first, it's small contradictions. "That's not what I meant," or "You're remembering it wrong." But over time, she rewrites entire chapters of your shared history. She remembers every mistake you ever made while conveniently forgetting her own. And because she delivers it with such conviction, you begin to doubt yourself. That doubt grows into dependence. Because when you can't trust your memory, you rely on hers. And that is exactly what she wants. I once spoke with a man who described the experience of being gaslit for years. He told me it was like losing the map of his own life. He no longer trusted his emotions, his memories, even his instincts. When he finally broke free, it took him months of silence and solitude just to remember what his own voice sounded like inside his head. This is the cost of reality distortion. It doesn't just steal your confidence, it steals your identity. Even more ruthless is the emotional terrorist. While the gaslighter makes you doubt your mind, the emotional terrorist holds your heart hostage. She knows that your care for her is your weakness, so she uses it as leverage. If you set a boundary, she threatens to leave. If you assert yourself, she threatens to hurt herself. If you dare to challenge her behavior, she threatens to destroy your reputation. These threats may not always be spoken outright, but the message is clear: comply or pay the price. This dynamic traps men in a constant state of fear. You become responsible not only for your emotions, but for hers. If she spirals into despair, you blame yourself. If she lashes out, you wonder what you did wrong. Every action you take is filtered through the question, will this set her off? Over time, you stop expressing your own needs entirely. The relationship becomes a one-sided negotiation where she dictates terms, and you silently comply. Nietzsche once said, "The man who fights too long against dragons becomes a dragon himself." But here, the danger is the opposite. Fight too long against an emotional terrorist, and you stop being yourself altogether. Then comes a quieter, but equally destructive figure, the identity thief. She does not scream, threaten, or even argue much. Instead, she slowly reshapes you, trimming away the parts of your life that don't serve her. It begins with small comments. "Why do you spend so much time with him? He's a bad influence." Or, "That hobby is childish." Don't you think, one by one, your friendships, your passions, even your ambitions fall away? At first, you tell yourself you're just compromising, adjusting, growing together. But in truth, you are being erased. The identity thief rewards you for conforming to her needs and punishes you when you express your authentic self. She tells you it's love, that she's only trying to make you better. But the better she envisions is not better for you. It's better for her. By the time you realize what has happened, you look in the mirror and barely recognize the man staring back. You've become a version of yourself sculpted entirely to her liking, while your true self lies buried under years of subtle discouragement. And finally, there is the recovery saboteur. This woman fears not who you are, but who you might become, because your growth threatens the power dynamic she depends on. If you begin therapy, she calls it selfish. If you set aside time for self-improvement, she creates a crisis that pulls you away. If you try to break free from old patterns, she knows exactly which buttons to press to drag you back. She doesn't need you destroyed. She needs you stuck in the same wounds, the same cycles, the same dysfunction that keeps her secure. One man I worked with began attending weekly therapy sessions to heal after years of chaos. Every time he had a breakthrough, his partner would erupt in anger that very night. She accused him of abandoning her, of changing too quickly, of thinking he was too good for her now. Within months, he stopped going, not because he wanted to, but because the emotional cost at home was too high. His progress threatened her control, so she killed it at the root. If you notice the pattern, each archetype moves deeper into your core. First, they take your energy, then your boundaries, then your reality, then your very growth. It is a gradual invasion, until there is nothing left that has not been touched. And yet, the most frightening part is still to come. Because beyond the erosion of yourself and the distortion of your reality lies a prison almost impossible to escape. The psychological bonds that feel like love, but are chains. By the time most men realize what they're caught in, it's already too late. The slow erosion of self, the constant defense against illusions, the cycles of chaos and relief. These are not accidents, they are patterns. And patterns always leave traces if you know how to see them. The first warning sign is speed. When a woman pushes for accelerated intimacy, deep emotional connection within weeks, exclusive commitment before you've had time to truly know her. It is not passion, it is urgency. She wants to secure you before her mask slips. A healthy relationship unfolds gradually. A dangerous one rushes you because it cannot withstand time. The second sign is isolation. She does not forbid you from seeing your friends or family. She makes it emotionally costly. A sigh when you mention visiting your parents. A fight the night before you meet old friends. Subtle remarks about how certain people don't really support you. Over time, you reduce contact to avoid conflict. The result is the same as a direct order. Your support system disappears, leaving her as your only anchor. And once she's your only anchor, she becomes your cage. The third sign is what I call reality negotiation. It begins softly. You recall an event one way. She recalls it another. She doesn't outright deny, it's more subtle. "I think you're misunderstanding what happened. That's not how I remember it." It seems harmless, even polite. But repeated over months, it reshapes your trust in yourself. Soon you are more inclined to defer to her memory than your own. That is the seed of gaslighting planted in your mind long before you realize it has taken root. One of the cruelest tactics these women employ is the use of social proof. Aristotle once said, "Man is by nature a social animal. We crave validation from others." A manipulative partner uses that against you. She surrounds herself with allies who reinforce her version of events. To them, she is gentle, reasonable, long-suffering. To them, you are difficult, selfish, unstable. Your concerns are dismissed not only by her, but by the very people you hoped would support you. This makes you question yourself even more. Some even recruit your own friends or family, carefully presenting themselves as the injured party. You become isolated not by force, but by perception. And then there are the financial entanglements. They start innocently enough. Shared expenses, joint accounts, perhaps a loan co-signed for the future you'll build together. But gradually, these ties tighten into chains. She encourages lifestyle inflation that relies on your income. She pushes for debts that serve her comfort, but burden you with responsibility. Some will even sabotage your career by creating crises at critical moments, ensuring your focus never strays too far from her. Financial bondage becomes a practical extension of psychological bondage. The cost of leaving becomes unbearable. So you stay, even when you know you should go. The deepest prison of all, however, is the trauma bond. This is not love. It is addiction. She creates cycles of intense stress followed by sudden relief, a fight that feels apocalyptic, followed by reconciliation that feels heavenly. That contrast floods your brain with chemicals. Dopamine, cortisol, oxytocin, that wire you into dependency. It is the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. You never know when the next win is coming, so you keep pulling the lever, except in this case. The lever is her approval, her affection, her fleeting warmth. You begin to confuse intensity with intimacy. You tell yourself, it must be love, because I've never felt so strongly. But the strength of the feeling is not proof of depth. It is proof of manipulation. I once counseled a man who said leaving his partner felt harder than breaking an actual drug habit. He knew she was destructive. He knew she was erasing him. But the thought of losing her made him feel physically sick. That is the mark of trauma bonding. You cling to the very thing that is killing you, convinced that without it, you cannot survive. So how do you protect yourself? It begins with discernment. Learn to tell the difference between genuine vulnerability and weaponized victimhood, between authentic intimacy and manufactured intensity, between love that expands you and love that shrinks you. Real love builds. It does not erode. It makes you more of yourself, not less. It also requires boundaries that do not collapse under guilt. A healthy woman will respect your need for space, for friends, for independence. A toxic one will frame those needs as rejection. Remember this. Boundaries are not walls against love. They are the soil in which love grows. And most importantly, you must remember that you cannot heal someone who refuses to face themselves. You cannot love someone into health. To attempt it is not noble. It is self-destruction. True partnership requires two people willing to carry their own shadows, not one carrying both. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow." Find your why outside of her chaos. Anchor your identity in something larger than her storms. Your mission, your purpose, your growth. When you stand rooted in that, no manipulation can move you for long. If you have seen yourself in these patterns, let this be a warning and a promise. The warning: these dynamics do not fix themselves. The longer you remain, the more they consume. The promise: you are not alone, and there is a path out. Protection comes not from suspicion, but from clarity, and clarity begins with knowledge. If this message has helped you see more clearly, subscribe to this channel. Not for me, but for yourself, because every insight you gain is another layer of armor, another weapon of discernment in a world where appearances deceive. Share this with a man who may be walking blindly into these traps. It could save him years of pain disguised as love. The women worth your time are not the ones who drain you. who colonize your spirit, who force you to shrink to keep them whole. They are the ones who carry their own weight, who face their shadows, and who walk beside you rather than pulling you down. True care does not consume, it cultivates. True love does not erase, it reveals. And when you find it, you'll know. Because instead of fearing the moment you open your own front door, you'll feel something else entirely. Peace.